Welcome to this week's episode of Trump's America. I'm your host, Mick Larson. This week we are exploring the subject of anti-racism. To illuminate that subject is my guest, Kim Palermo. She is an anti-racism educator. She also works in the DEI space. She is a self-described disruptor and accomplice. She speaks the ugly truth over pretty lies. All right, let's do this. Well, Kim, welcome to the podcast. As we record this, it's December 5th, exactly a month since the election. So now that you've had a month to process the election, what are your thoughts about Trump being elected and beating Kamala Harris?
I'm personally traumatized. How else can I put it? I definitely am. I'm sad. I'm disappointed in my fellow humans. Very, very disappointed because I know this is really who we are, but I think we can do better, and I know we can do better. And it was a shock, I have to say. It was definitely a shock.
How shocked were you? Because I thought she was probably going to win at least 5 swing states.
Okay, if I'm going to be honest, I don't want to be a know-it-all, or somebody who says, I knew I was right, but I told my family over and over, because I've been doing this for a while, and I'm not exactly an election caller, somebody who knows that, but I knew he was going to win. Sad to say, and I didn't want it to be true, but I knew he was going to win.
Yeah, you were hoping to be wrong, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, I knew he was going to win. If I could tell a quick story during the 2016 when he made it into office, when he first started to go up, and he wasn't really the nominee even. The first time I saw him up on stage, smack in the middle with all the people who wanted to be the nominee as well. And when he started disparaging our fellow humans in such sick and depraved ways, I turned to my husband and I said, he's going to win. And I didn't hear anybody, not one person, say, excuse me, how dare you? How dare you speak to our fellow citizens this way? And not a single one. And I just turned to him and he said, oh, and not to throw him under the bus, but he's like, oh, he's a joke. The man's a joke. Come on. And I just was like, God, I don't want to be right, but he will win. And when he went after that, I was like, dang. Finally, a skill I'm really good at. Decide, not in a good way, but anyway, I was like, dang it. So yeah, I knew he was going to win. It's just really sad.
How do you think do you see the Democratic Party or Kamala Harris's campaign doing anything that cost them the election per se?
Honestly, it's not my field of expertise, but if I had to say, just by chance, her not getting to start out with more time to get, to get her message across. But sadly, I think the indoctrination had already happened, and that it was kind of over before it was. I just don't think, and sounds like an insult, but in general, because of the internet and because of social media and misinformation and also our human nature, we're also very incredibly misinformed and not educated, and that showed in the polls when they did. And I'm not saying that university education does something makes you better, but certainly people became hyper focused on how cool they felt around Trump, but actually it wasn't. They felt really great about it, but it wasn't good things. It's kind of like that happens. You might feel really safe because you have 10 guns in your house, but actually stats show that the more guns you have in your house, the more likely you're going to die from those guns. So it was one of those kind of things. People felt it. They wanted to feel empowered, but I hate to say it, I don't think it's going to work out so great. But anyway, I could go on and on.
Yeah,
and
it's
I will.
The other interesting thing I did look up that only 65% of the country voted, eligible voters. So a third of the country didn't vote at all, which is sad in itself. I tried to find out, do naturalized citizens actually vote at a higher rate than, you're just born here? And I assume they do, because they don't. I don't think they take it for granted. But couldn't find that stat. But I
right?
just common sense tells me they probably do vote at a higher rate.
Mhm.
I would imagine. Um,
I would think.
so with the election results, how has that impacted you and what you're concerned about?
Well, I'm very concerned on a lot of levels, on a lot of things, but mostly how this is all going to go down because I believe every word he says. I believe he's going to follow through with Project 2025. I believe he's going to take retribution. He's going to get revenge on his what he calls his opponents or enemies. I believe he is going to do a mass deportation. I believe he is going to become a dictator, and I don't say this because I want to be true or right. I'm following history, and this is how the twilight of democracies go. If you've ever read that book, this is kind of how it goes, and he is following suit to the T, and it's really scary. So I'm afraid for one thing. I'm mostly afraid for is in his mass deportation, as has historically been shown. Um, it's going to be a shit show.
Yeah.
And you can't walk up to a school or a university or a building or a housing community and look at people, see them, oh, you're brown, you're illegal. I mean, it's horrible. You don't have papers to be here. That's just not how things can go. And deputizing people who don't know what they're doing, or getting people who don't know what they're doing, who are in power, to do this kind of thing is horrible. It's going to be inhumane. And that's what my biggest concern is, how inhumane. I mean, they can grab anyone they want and no one's going to stop them. And that's absolutely terrifying to me. So,
And obviously, we have a historical precedent for this,
yeah.
sadly.
Yeah. Last time we did this to mostly Latino and Mexican Americans, it was horrendous, and the Japanese internment, and I mean, we could go on and on. And this is how it goes. My biggest fear is he's going to immediately, create a state of emergency, a fake state of emergency where he has to, and in that will give him special rights to do a
Yep.
lot of things. Um, he already likes to have special rights to do a lot of things, so it's. I just don't see this going too well. I'm really actually scared for others, and less actually for myself, but more for other people around me, I have to say.
Do you think his unqualified, unserious cabinet positions and head of agencies, what does that reflect, do you think?
That reflects one thing and one thing only, and that's his ego and his need to be right, his need to have people tell him he's right, his need to have people around him who he feels are loyal. He kind of functions like a mob boss type, like you'd see on TV. And this is just my obviously personal take. He needs, as a narcissist, he needs to have people around him who tell him he's great or make him feel like he's amazing and great and right. And I think he's disturbed personally. And I don't mean that I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, but I don't think it's rocket science to say, from what we've seen in the last, 10 years or more, that something's incredibly wrong with him, emotionally, mentally. Um,
Well, he's a narcissist, so
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean that's all you really need to that
Right.
all the behaviors that you're talking about are behaviors of narcissists.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
Like, especially the gaslighting.
oh, the gaslighting is honestly off I call it like it's like on steroids. It's gaslighting on steroids. It's 3D chess level gaslighting. I don't know what to call it. Out of control. And I think what happens sometimes is when people are getting misinformation, facts, and somewhere in between, and they don't know what's going on, what it does is it makes folks think, well, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And people are so busy trying to make ends meet and just get food on the table that they don't have time to do research and really look into their past and what did he do before he was president? What did he do? Who is this person? And so what happens is we end up thinking, well, the truth is probably somewhere in between, and I don't really have time to look into it. And so that couldn't be further from the truth. I truly believe there is a truth and there is a lie. And sure, some people exaggerate, but what that does is activists and people who want to get involved, nobody wants to get involved if they're not really sure. I mean, no one's going to take a stand about, I really don't know what's going on, because, that's kind of boring. And
I
so
think
that's
to
it.
illustrate your point is the confusion over the economy. Obviously, eggs and gas, the prices of commodities obviously went up because of inflation and are still up. But if someone's voting on that and they're really busy, like you said, and I agree with you 100%, people are busy, they don't have time. For the people like us that have the luxury to have access to news and have the time to read the news, you actually know that the US economy rebounded the best in the whole world after COVID. We have the strongest economy in the world right now. We are in the best position of any country in the world. And so that's where exactly what you're talking about. That's the difference.
Right. And what he does is what Trump and his I call him his clan, and I don't mean that rudely. I truly feel like it's our white supremacy group.
Well, it's
In
definitely a
general,
cult.
yes, yeah. He creates a problem through propaganda and through ranting and raving about certain things. He creates a problem. And you might say, well, no, that's weird. I never experienced that, but everyone else must be experiencing that, you know? And so you get this problem that he creates that only he has the solution for. And that's kind of how these types of things go down, I think. This is kind of the MO of people who want to be, authoritarian
Oh
dictators,
yeah.
or, it's kind of,
Well, it's Dictator 101. There's actually a book out I read
exactly.
called How to Be a Dictator.
Right.
And
I've posted
obviously,
on
number
that.
one, you've got to create an enemy, the outgroup,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you got
And
to
the enemy
demonize
within,
somebody.
right? The enemy within now is a huge part of it, and that's what I just wrote an article on, actually, the Korean president, what's going on in South Korea, and
Right.
how it's we can learn from it, but I just don't think people have the time. And I mean, almost half the people in the country wanted this. I think they wanted the image of this strong man that he created. And the problem is, strength doesn't come from where people think it does. And this is just obviously my personal take, but from my life's experience, strength comes from being compassionate and having empathy and being able to walk in someone else's shoes. And I'm not saying, let criminals go and let the border be open. No. And people will say,
Of course
oh,
not.
she wants, no, but common freaking sense. We're all humans. We're on this planet for such a very short time. At the same time, by chance, why would we treat each other like enemies and not try to understand each other? Strength to me isn't being a big brute and using our reptilian brain to function. It's just not. And for some reason, we get fearful by having a fear created for us, such as everybody's running through the open border and killing people. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not if you say it enough. And then pretty soon we have that fear built up, and people just react to fear. They're afraid. So it's a toughie, but he's created a perfect storm for what's happening.
I think another thing that illustrates your point about compassion and empathy is trans bathrooms, trans women using women's restrooms. I can't think of a more vulnerable group of people than trans. And
Absolutely.
the fact that there's no sympathy or empathy, because I posted about this on TikTok and it's just insane the responses I've gotten,
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah.
that the
I'm
people
sure.
say. But it's just like, you could you for 1 second put yourself in those people's shoes? Can you imagine?
And what the problem is? They can't, because most people think, "Oh, I've never met a transgender person." It's like, "Oh, yes, you have. You just don't know it."
Well, that's
And
there's that.
and a
Yeah.
lot of the people, no, your points are fantastic, and I agree 100%. It's heartless. It's cruel. The people who get murdered and beat up and traumatized aren't the people who are using the bathroom and going along the cisgender people. It's the transgender people. That's where they are harmed the most. And I always tell people, okay, you're a cisgender person, right? Let's say, how would you like to be forced to use the women's bathroom? I mean, just think about it. I mean, forced, not like, no one's in there and everyone's snuck in once in a while and the other one's closed. Not that. No, no, no. I mean, forced. I mean, of course you wouldn't. Well, how do you think they feel? And part of the problem in my mind is that I don't think people fully understand being transgender. And because most people have never, if you met someone who's transgender or someone who's revealed that to you, or maybe they didn't, and They're people just like us. They're just normal people trying to live life. If you were born transgender, wouldn't you want to? It's like that. So for some reason, this is a one topic. Okay, maybe not the one topic, but that people cannot uh, get, and it's been around since the beginning of time. This is not a new thing, so it's really strange. It's like cruelty, basically.
Um, you say it's the actually it changes every few decades. It used to
Right,
be interracial marriage, it was gay marriage. Now it's trans. So it's
right,
people
right,
that
right.
are there's a I'm actually going to do a podcast, the biology of your politics, because you can actually test people whether they're liberal or conservative, in their biology. And therefore it's like those folks that have those problems with all those different things are going to have the problem with the next thing, because they are conservative by nature. They don't like change. They don't, they can't deal with any level of chaos or disorder. And so that's the folks.
It might even not be disorder to their lives, but to their way of thinking, the way things should be, have always been, and ought to be. And you made a great point. And because you'll always see, and I hate to say it, I have never met anyone who is absolutely an activist for, the rights of the see, the gay, I can't say it, the community,
Yes.
and who have also said, "Oh, and I hate Black people. I'm a racist." I mean, it's like it doesn't work that way. People who stand up for the LGBTQ community um, don't all of a sudden like go and I think all immigrants should be shot. Or I mean, it's like they all kind of stay together in groups,
Yeah,
and
because they
so
have compassion and empathy.
right, or they
As it,
don't, and it blows me away because another thing I often do is I point out that most for anti-racism work, most white folks do not have, and I'm not playing the I have a Black friend card, but do not have a single close, intimate friend who isn't the same shade as them. And so they might be getting, and they don't interact with somebody like that at work or when they're walking around in their household. So they might technically have really never known anyone who's Black intimately and close. Because if they did, they'd know about all the systemic racism and they'd be absolutely supportive because they'd be friends with them and say, my God, I'm not going to let this shit happen to you. So
they would be woke
exactly. Oh God, say that
in the
word.
in traditional sense of the work, not the crazy woke that
Yeah,
the right has hijacked, but they
right,
would be
right.
woke because they would understand systemic racism, structural racism.
Absolutely. And they'd be empathetic and they'd say, for example, my kids had a couple friends who were transgender and I saw what they were going through. And I promise you, nobody chooses to be transgender
Of
in
course,
this hateful society. It's not like I want attention. Give me a break. That's attention that people could do without. So
sure. Well, this is a perfect segue to my next question. You're an anti-racist educator. What was your personal and professional journey to becoming an anti-racism counselor,
uh,
educator?
well, thank you for asking that. I was born in a little I was born in the era of where people didn't, it was color blindness. People didn't talk about racism. And if you did, you were a racist. So I was born in that era and I was okay, you're not going to believe this, but I swear it's true. Very shy. And I didn't talk to anybody. And I just kind of watched and had a lot of anxiety. And
I'm glad you grew out of it.
oh my God, now I can't touch that. Pathetic. I know. My family's like, wow. Okay. So I'm making up for lost time. And so what happened was I saw this kind of BS happening around me as I was, 6, 7, 8. And I was like, what is this? What is this liberty and justice for all these people speak of? Well, it doesn't seem like it's for all. It really doesn't. It seems like we're full of shit kind of, and we're lying. But everyone's playing along with it and no one's talking about it. And I was, obviously born into a very, very white world. And I was like, what the heck is wrong with me? So I thought something was wrong with me. And not to make it all about me, but as growing up, the cognitive dissonance was too much to bear. And I thought, I don't, what is going on? I don't really belong here. Like, what's happening? Like, I'm walking among liars, and I couldn't figure it out. And so I kind of had a quest to figure it out. And finally, I was a slow learner, and I slowly started catching on. And then I went to at my university. They didn't have multiculturalism back then. They didn't have really that kind of thing in the university. But when I was 18, I went to university, and I ended up learning a lot from being a major applied behavioral sciences major, and that opened my eyes up. Then I ended up going to work in Compton, California during the LA riots.
Mm-hmm.
Happened to be during the LA riots just by chance, and that was when Compton boasted the highest murder rate of any small city in the country. And I worked there, and talk about, you can study all you want, but I opened up my eyes. We had no books, we had no curriculum. I was a probationary teacher who really shouldn't have been there. Half my class was at, you know, kindergarten level. I taught fourth, fifth, and the other half was at sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. I mean, I had 40 kids in my class.
Oh,
40 kids, one teacher. I was 23 years old, and I was like a deer in
yeah.
headlights.
They've made movies about this.
Yeah, I was like a deer in headlights, and very unqualified to be there, but with a big heart. And my my children were my first babies. My children were my first babies. I didn't have children then, and I wonder to this day. There's not a day that goes by that I wonder what happened to the kids that I work with. I had them for 2 years, and I just hope they made it. And I would love one day. My fantasy is that one day I get to meet up with some of them and see how they did, because they're grown adults now. And so that's basically that's in there's a
So
lot to say about how I got
sure.
here,
I'm
and I could talk.
curious for people that are listening, I'm curious, what did you do to self-educate yourself about racism to get to at least as a starter before I
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The first thing I started to do was this is like 20, maybe this is like 20 years ago. I had, worked in Compton. I had done my undergraduate with multiculturalism. I had, learned all these things, but it wasn't enough. You can read all you want. Um, how I started was my husband and I decided we were going to adopt a baby, and we he's from a small town, way up in my state, and he met his first black person. Not going to throw him under the bus, when he was like 18. He didn't know anything about it. He's from a
no
very
fault of
conservative.
himself, he just didn't live anywhere that there
Right,
were any. Yeah.
exactly, in that forest. And so he met his first black person when he was, and they weren't really a black person, they were more like a Latino person, and it was crazy. And
A person
his
of color, yeah.
had a person of color, and he didn't know, he was, and so he had no experience knowing anything about,
Their
multicultural.
culture.
He'd never even
Yeah.
been to New York City, even, to see that there's a lot of people about a lot of different things going on. But so he was sheltered, and when we decided to adopt, he felt strongly that we should adopt a baby that looked like the family. And I was like, what? And it wasn't because of racism. He felt like he's private. Like the baby's story is always told by their mere presence. And he goes, that's not fair. He lived in a small town where the newspaper would announce him coming home for Christmas. Okay. I mean, that's how bad it was. And so I understood what he was saying, and I didn't feel that way, but you got to really search your soul when you want to adopt. And so ended up not being able to adopt from Guatemala. And that's where we started, because they closed. I think our president insulted their president, and it was some crazy stuff. We're like
Hmm.
the last people to not. And so anyway, we lost our child. And we were actually on the day we were supposed to adopt him too. So it was really tragic
Oh
for
wow.
us.
Yeah.
Um, did end up getting the foster family that had him in Guatemala, ended up adopting him, thank God. And it was,
Well,
but
that's good
anyway,
to
so
hear.
we switched to Ethiopia. And I have a 16-year-old who is Ethiopian American right now, and she is a crazy teen. But so what I first did before we adopted her was I said to myself, Kim, you are going to raise a child of color, and you better get your ass in gear for this, because this is not going to be a party. And if you're going to do this, you're going to do it right. So I went and I tried to find groups online, and I wasn't really on the internet at the time. Well, that's a whole nother story. But I didn't really know what the internet was even. But I was like, wow, I better go right to people who have lived this, people who've been adopted. And I couldn't find anyone who would talk to me.
Wow, I'm surprised.
I found one group, but they told me I can't really repeat this on your program, but they told me I was a selfish beep,
Hmm.
child that didn't look like us, and that was cruel and mean, and I was like, what?
Yeah,
Because
that's great.
I knew that the kids of color and whatnot are the least adopted,
Yeah.
and I don't care if your family's white or black or brown, but to not have a family, that's awful. So I was like, oh, and they were adamant, and I ended up like, it was
Yeah, that's scary.
crazy. They and everyone in the group was like that, and so I'm like, okay, this isn't good. So I ended up started my own group, and I didn't even know what a group was. I was like, I'm just going to do it because I need to know, and it turned out to be just magical. But the group was, that's a whole nother story. But how I started was realizing I don't know what I'm doing and just being okay with that and saying, you know what? I don't know about this. It's not my fault. It's nothing I've done. There's no guilt involved. There's no, it's a system. I was born into a system like everybody else was. And I've been indoctrinated into that system of white supremacy. And it's not my fault. I didn't do anything. And maybe my parents perpetuated it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were neutral and didn't say anything. But you get indoctrinated. And so every white person is somewhere along that steep anti-racism continuum,
Yeah.
even if it's just implicit bias. It's not our fault. So I I got my ego go away, at least temporarily, and I started listening to black people and brown people when they talked about, and I listened and I listened and I listened. And I wrote one comment online one time, and somebody snapped at me, and I learned to delete. And that was my first thing I ever learned to do, was delete. I'm like, how do you delete this? How do you delete? And I didn't even know what the word was. So I slowly started getting more confident from listening to black people and listening to what they were saying. And didn't matter where they were from in the US, didn't matter where they were from in the world. They were all saying the same stories over and over again. They didn't know each other. And it just went from there. And my eyes opened up, and I was like, there's a whole history that I have absolutely no clue about. I mean, the 1 month once a year I had an education of Martin Luther King Jr. just wasn't cutting it. Where they cherry pick a few things and say, yay, yay, that's great. But I became this obsessed person with our real racial history, and that helped. But
How
the
did
first,
you? Sorry, I'm sorry.
no, not at all. The first step's talking and listening to black voices and hearing them and feeling them.
And what was your journey as far as professionally becoming an anti-racism educator?
Well, it has been really rough because every time um, I accidentally became an influencer, like accidentally, I guess you could say, because all I was doing 10 years ago was talking really openly about what I thought. And I guess that's kind of not something a lot of white people do. And so people wanted to hear me talk, which is hilarious because I'm the worst. I mean, oh my God, articulate isn't even in my vocabulary. I mean, I'm horrible. All I do is just be honest, and I'd write the truth and what I thought. And people were coming to me like crazy, wanting to hear what I had to say. And I was like, dang, all I'm doing is what you're supposed to do. Just be honest. And I don't have a lot of boundaries, and I have kind of an innocent kind of way about me. And people were like, tell us more. And I was laughing. I thought I was just chance, like, oh, or whatever. But it turned out that people wanted to hear what I had to say. And so I got monetized, and I did all that. And I was on my way. I was doing interviews, and I was interviewing people. I had book clubs. I went nuts because I was like, this is the time to, during the Obama administration, make this happen. It's time to learn and educate everybody and, take racial responsibility for white folks, because the people who are living this under the system of systemic racism and white supremacy, they're overwhelmed with it every day. And we, in the aggregate, did this. Now, to talk like this, you have to understand, I don't have guilt. I don't blame myself. I'm very talking about boundaries. I really don't.
You have perspective.
Yeah, I didn't do this. I didn't like, it's like,
Exactly.
I didn't build the system. I didn't purposely shove anyone into the system. I didn't, like I tell people it's a terrible analogy, but why would you walk by somebody slowly drowning, fellow human, in a pool and just walk by and say, well, I didn't shove you in, or even more, I didn't build the pool. Well, you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't. That's ridiculous. Then why do we pretend? And I know there are a lot of reasons, and some of them are understandable. Why do we pretend that systemic racism isn't the basis of our society and our culture? And just it's like this open like secret. And so what I decided to do, I worked as an influencer. I loved it. I loved doing it. I got the opportunity to interview um, some amazing people, just amazing people. Not everybody anti-racist person. I at the time I interviewed somebody who was the head of the Aryan Brotherhood in
Hmm.
Mississippi for 15 years, and he ended up changing my life very, very much perspective wise. I thought I knew. And my interview was like humbling as hell, and it taught me a lot. And had the opportunity to work with Mississippi Black Lives Matter a while back, and they helped me get in touch with people who've had their relatives murdered by police. And so I've had some incredible people come my way, and it's all just been amazing for me. And then all of a sudden, I got kicked off all my social stuff, everything. No
Wow.
warning, no warning, no recourse, no reason, and no jail time. I didn't even get to jail in some of these places. They like
Yeah.
stuff and
No suspension. You got
no, I
total
just got a
86. Huh? Wow.
total got a letter saying we've decided that you're kicked off for life
Wow.
starting an hour ago. Basically.
Right. Right.
I so I started up again on a whole. After I
Hmm.
like regrouped and was like, okay,
Yeah.
that was my
It's
it was my dream. My dream in life was to try to make a difference, not to be a savior, not to be this like white savior person. I do it for me. It's selfish. I do it for me because I can't stand living a lie. It it's just too much to bear. I know. Maybe I was just born that way, but so yeah, I got booted off for life. Started all over, the whole thing all over, and then happened again. And it wasn't like I was swearing or doing. I was just speaking the truth. But
well, I do know. I mean, like speaking the truth can get you kicked off because if you talk about how often
yeah,
black men were lynched in the South, which is like every 3 days for 50 years, I mean, that's going to get you kicked off. Um,
exactly. So
mentioning
you totally
lynching.
understand. You
Oh
understand.
yeah, because I've gotten kicked off for historical fact, and they're like, you can't say that. It's like I'm just talking about what actually happened. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so they've overdone the safeguarding that you can't even state actual historical facts.
Right. Yeah. No. So you get it, and you
Yeah.
get it. So that's how it went down, and so over the years that I've been doing this, I finally ended up just. Oh, my husband said, go on LinkedIn, and I became basically a person who takes contracts for educating people, and he's laughing at me because he's like, only you would pick the one career that the black people can't trust you and the brown people can't trust you and the white people hate your
Hey,
guts. They think you're a
yeah.
race traitor. He goes,
Hmm.
good luck with that. But he's very supportive, and I'm like, yeah, I know. Look at me, like, but I love educating people. I love the moment they just get it because my work is done. They just go off, and once you get this and it's not about you and you dropped your ego and you realize it's not about me, it's about our culture, and nothing will stop you from learning the truth. And so that's kind of how I started. And now I create programs for anyone who wants to watch them and learn. And I specialize. I don't teach Black people. I do not teach brown people. If they learn from me, that's great, and I'd be thrilled. And I have tons and tons and tons of friends that are Black and brown, but that would be arrogant for me to think that like they have this lived experience, and who am I? Who the hell am I to teach them? Like that's actually kind of that's pushing my white supremacy, my privilege on them, saying like,
Sure, of
well,
course.
I know best. No, I don't know best. I listen and I learn from them, and I've had experience. So the people I teach are white folks, and I start at the lowest levels, and not as an insult, but if you don't understand what a human construct is, if you don't understand what race as a system is, if you don't understand the science of skin tone, and you don't understand the society that we live in, then everything else is going to be almost impossible to understand. And if you don't understand the history of what this country has gone through, I mean, in detail, I don't mean, okay, I know one massacre took place. No, I mean hundreds and thousands of things like this. If you don't know the history, how in the world is anyone going to understand what's going on today? It's not their fault. They won't. So that's what I
Yeah.
do.
Th- th-
That,
What you're saying, it reminds me, I was reading the new Jim Crow, and it was so,
love that.
I was so depressed from all the Supreme Court decisions that went against Black people. I didn't get through it. I would just, it was too depressing because it's like, oh my God, the Supreme Court. You would think they would know better, but they're people of that time. They don't know better. It's just so
Nick,
bad and
you're not going
so
to believe it.
sad.
That happened to me when I put it on tape. This is a long time ago. Put it on tape, and I got about a third of the way through, and I was like, this is just, I'm enraged listening. I'm
Yeah.
enraged listening to this book, and I'm getting more enraged. And I had to stop and like stop. I was going on a really long trip, and I was going to listen for 6 hours straight, and I couldn't take it. I was like, I
It's
wanted to throttle everyone in history, but I totally relate to that.
well, and you also work in the DEI space, so talk a little bit about that.
It's been really, really tough to get a position in that. And I've done a lot of, oh my gosh, free consulting and working for companies that needed everything for, needed stuff like that. Um, and that's what kind of made me decide that I need to just have my own organization and do my own contracting, because it's very, very hard to get into DEI. A lot of the people, especially nowadays, think of the culture we're in right now. It's really, really tough. I'm a white person, and quite frankly, a white person probably shouldn't be
Yeah.
the leader of DEI. And I truly believe that. I believe there's a position for us to help a ton and be an assistant and do everything. I do not think we should be making the rules, because that's, once again, we don't get to tell Black, Brown, Indigenous people and people of mixed heritage that we know best. And even if we're educated, we don't live it. And so right now I'm just creating courses, I do consulting, and I don't work in corporate DEI, and I never have. And part of that's because I can't get in.
Right.
It doesn't
And
really matter.
have have you been in the DEI space when it was, a very positive message and helping kids, especially at the university level, helping corporations have a more diversified workforce? Were you in it at that time? And as it's changed, have you noticed the change over the last decade, 15 years?
Oh, I wasn't in it then because I was doing my
Hmm.
online work, and I was loving it because I was reaching people who I'd never reach in a million years. No one in the groups that I had were being forced to learn, about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, they mostly work in small companies, or working where they would not learn that. So it was really cool. I was catching all the people who didn't get that, but I never worked in that field directly in a corporation, and
Gotcha.
I never really, I if I did, I would only work for a Black-owned business who did non-performative work. That's my problem. I mean, I can't just live a lie and check off boxes. I want to make incredible changes and help people learn and grow. And it's not just because that's what I want, but I know what it did for me. It opened up my entire world, and it closed that strong cognitive dissonance I had about what I knew, liberty and justice for all, and what I saw. And it is so freeing. And I'm definitely not the only one that probably, feels that way. And if I could help somebody to get it, or to find their voice, or to know if they see something going on, they're confident enough to stand up. Like one of my videos was one of my best videos I did was the top 10 classic cliche denials of racism, systemic racism. And that was one of my first videos I did 10 or 12 years ago, maybe.
Mhm.
And I got like 750,000 hits on it, because I guess people never talk about it. And if you're a white
Especially
person,
not from
and
a white perspective.
yeah, and if you're a white person and you're like, I want to learn, but I just, I'm so busy, I can barely feed my kids, whatever, and I don't know where to start, and people are gonna think I'm racist, and oh my gosh, like, I don't want to come across
It's
as racist.
overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, and I don't know black people. What are they gonna do? Come up to a black person and say, can you teach me? I mean, they're dealing with enough. That's not. They're
Not their
having enough.
job.
It's not their job. So it's just, people just forget about it, and anyway, it's a rough place to be, but those are the people I love teaching. So,
Well, this is my next question, and it seems I don't know how it worked out to be so perfect, but we'll see. When it comes to all the forms of racism, do you think your average white American has been robbed of an education that would have equipped them with the understanding of America's extreme racist history?
oh my gosh, what a loaded question. Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I'm a special education teacher and regular education teacher, so I mean, this the system's working as planned. I hate to say it, and the wealthiest elites who run this country, and who more and more and more, after uh, Citizens United, and all these, I'm not going
Yeah.
to get into a lot, but I mean, we're we're oligarchy, and we're very much jumping into a dictatorship. And as everyone, I can't say everyone, most people might know by now, and it's an incredibly scary place because it's on our watch, and that's just, it's hard to deal with. But anyway, um, yes, a comprehensive program from pre-K up, age appropriate, through high school, not once a week, not a monthly program, but each day, like teaching about our country and what we're about, not guilting people out. The only people who get guilty are people who have done something wrong. Kids don't mind learning about history. We teach them about the Civil War. We teach them about the Revolutionary War. We teach them about
World
murder.
War
This,
II, Hitler,
see the
everything.
book. My
Yeah.
kids are reading. My kids read books that I was like, "Are you serious?" Yeah, it didn't make people feel guilty. It's called history. They didn't feel guilty about that. The people who feel guilty are the parents of the kids. They're the ones who are having the problems with it. And I won't get into that. I did a video on that too, but about why they have problems. I just, yeah, comprehensive education would change in a generation. It would change this entire country, but we don't want that. We, being the, white folks who run the country, that they don't want that. They don't even want the word. They don't even want the curriculum, even during 1 month of the year. They don't want our history. They don't want the truth, because they, and I won't get this right, but Lyndon B. Johnson has this crazy saying, and I can't quote him because I don't remember it from memory, but it's basically, if you get a bunch of white folks to feel like they're special, and they can look down upon somebody, they'll empty their pockets for free. And we are suckers, generation after generation. We think maybe someday we'll be rich. Maybe, well, that's not how the system is built or worked. It's not, and it's just to keep us working, and them getting richer and us scrambling to, so I
Are
guess
you
if that,
saying are you saying the American dream is a scam?
yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. I don't, yes, I'm saying it. Oh God, I'm gonna get hate mail, and I've gotten all that before, so I'm
Oh,
not.
I asked the question because I know the answer. The answer is yeah, of course it is. It's a
Yes, that's what
narrative. It's a narrative,
it's
and
lovely, but it's a
just
lovely idea.
it's the same narrative. We're all created equal.
Right, right, right. And people have taken. one of the things that I've noticed though has been just nuts over the years are how they've taken words like DEI and white privilege or words of academia. I mean, people have been studying this for centuries, you know?
Yeah.
Black people have been talking about this for centuries. Uh, but they take these words and they vilify them or they sanitize them. And when they do that, it's like normalizing everything, just normalizes everything. Oh, another police shot a black man walking to work uh, on his cell phone and said it was a gun. I mean, it's just like, oh yeah, another, you know. So I mean, this is it seems on some levels it's a very very simple thing. Treat people decently and with respect. But on the other side, it's incredibly complex, having to do with psychology and sociology and culture, and you know, it's crazy. So.
So what you kind of touched on this, but I'll ask it more directly. But what do you think the motivation is for these, I'm going to say conservative white folks that want to hide the history away from their kids when their kids had nothing to do with this?
Well, parents who want to hide the history have not done their own personal introspection for themselves. They have the problem inside them, and what it is they don't understand what it is. They have guilt, they have anger, they have fear, they have misunderstandings, and they've probably been seen. I mean, when I was a little girl, I remember I was 3 or 4 years old. I've come down at night in the middle of the night, and I'd see peek out downstairs, and I'd see my parents were watching a TV show, and it had a bunch of flashing lights all over the place, and like 5 or 10 black people standing in a row with these little things over their eyes, so like you couldn't tell who they were, I guess, kind of.
Hmm.
And every night I'd sneak out, like, what are they? Every night it's the same thing. And what I was watching was the 11 o'clock news in California.
Hmm.
And I was a little kid, and that was basically the perp walk. And they had black people with these little things that covered their eyes, like you do on,
Hmm.
online. And I was like 3 or 4 years old. And what do you think I thought? I didn't have to.
Yeah.
Society was telling me black bad, black police, that's all I need to know. And so, I mean, a lot of the people who don't want the history told, they are, they're afraid because they don't get it, and everything. I mean, imagine somebody coming up to you and saying every single thing you've ever learned in your life was a lie. Your parents lied, your teachers lied, your friends lied, everyone just went along with it and told you wrong. That's a lot to take.
Well, and
And
and in fact,
we're
it's not
telling
even
them,
right. And in fact, it's not necessarily that they lied. Uh,
right,
when when your grandparents went to
they were
school,
lied
that
to.
they were lied to, or they omitted.
Right, omission, a lie of omission.
Omission.
Right,
On purpose,
right.
obviously.
Yeah, and
And
a
so
lot of us.
people don't know. A lot of people just don't know any better. Although,
And also, right, exactly. You're saying it perfectly. And for example, the the Dunning Kruger effect really kind of comes into play because you think well, I know about Martin Luther King Jr. I know about that. Slavery ended. People who were enslaved, it ended, and then everything was good. Like, what are you talking about? Well, they don't understand that. Are you kidding me?
yeah.
Like, no, that's not. No, everything wasn't good. So they think they know, and it's not their fault, but they think they know and they don't know. And that's one of the biggest things I do when I educate people is I do tons of hidden history videos, tons, and it
Yeah.
slowly like sinks in. But
Well,
I mean,
you take something like the Tulsa riots that I probably learned about 10 years ago.
right, right, right.
And the Tulsa riots were a huge deal. I mean, that's awful what happened. Well, we were not. I wasn't taught that in high school on purpose. On
I
purpose,
I learned when my one of my kids, I learned about what black codes and sundown towns were
right?
from one of my kids,
Yep.
years and years ago. But still, I was like, what? I I didn't learn any of that.
We
I,
didn't learn about the one drop rule. We didn't learn about redlining. We didn't learn any of that stuff, and
Right, right.
those are big
Exactly.
deals.
Absolutely. So you totally got it. Yeah. I mean, so but I thought I knew. I thought I mean, hell, I went to undergrad for this. I knew, but nope. So
Well, we're just about out of time, but let me ask you one more question. Do you think the election of Barack Obama and the political emergence of Trump is a period of extreme white resentment and white backlash? Is that do you see that how it's all come to a head here?
of course, absolutely. And there's this pendulum that goes back and forth. And whenever you let something go for so long, it's just like, I hate to say it, like the Me Too movement. Now the pendulum, we did all these horrible things. We didn't address it. And then the backlash was way on the other side. And yes, it was an absolute backlash because we've never come to terms with our culture of white supremacy. And we still haven't. And that's why we're doing what we're doing today. We have such a divided nation. We've never come to terms. I can't say what it started, the compromise of 1877. I don't know. There's a lot of places that we messed up, but yes, and yes, and yes.
Right. Last question. I lied.
That's okay.
Kim, are we still fighting the Civil War?
Yeah, it's actually, I did a video on it. We are still fighting the Civil War. The only thing that's changed, it's changed in form. You aren't going to see people burning crosses and people spewing the N-word like it's normalized, and people outwardly saying, I'm pro-slavery, but actually now we might be. I've heard a couple of that, but okay. Yes, we are. And it's because we never, once again, it's all about, we never reconciled and spoke the truth and just brought it out in the open and just spoke truth to power. We never did. It's kind of our way. The American way is just,
Brushing
make
it under
nice.
the rug.
Right. And the craziest thing is we have these incredible ideals, and whatever you think of the founding fathers, which a lot of people think a lot of things, they wrote a document and they created our Constitution, and it is an incredible, brilliant document, and it was meant to change and to last over time. And we are fighting to keep it now, and it's really sad because I think this country actually could be great, really great.
It could be better. Well, Kim, I appreciate you joining me on the podcast, and I hope we can talk again because we only got to half of the stuff I wanted to talk to. So
I
hopefully we
talk
can
a
do it
lot
again.
now. I talk so much, but thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure it's
And we
been to
will
talk.
talk later for sure.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
I'll let you get to your call.
Okay.
That was great.
Oh,
I appreciate it.
I hope I didn't talk too much because
No, not at all. I thought it was great. By the way, you've got to watch my documentary, What Would Jesus Do on Election Day? Because it goes into everything that we talked about. There's like, you will love it. It's like speaking to the choir.
I'm like, I love you. Tell your girlfriend.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I love you. It's not like that, but I do. I never ever get to talk to white men who are willing to talk about this. You're freaking awesome.
Well,
You're amazing.
Go to wwjd.vote. It's a 7-part documentary. What would Jesus do? .vote. And you don't need to watch the first episode. It's just, setting up Jesus lessons. But in episode 2 is about racism and America being founded on racism. So you'll really like it.
Oh, I love the truth. I crave the truth. Isn't that crazy? I don't know why, but
me too. So
I crave the truth, and not to be mean to people, but just because it honesty, just like living. I know what you know, you know what I know. We're not like fooling each other and trying to. I just like the truth.
Well, not everyone's born with that curiosity or even the intellectual curiosity, and obviously we both are, but that's a different thing,
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Wow. I would just do anything to work with you and collaborate with you further or do anything. You're amazing.
Well, we will talk.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll let you go.
Okay.
All right. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out this week's podcast. I loved hearing about Kim's journey towards being an anti-racism educator. Like Kim said, people are busy. Not everyone has the time to learn about the real history of racism in America. But you have to wonder, why as a country we were not taught the real history of racism in America? My guess is, if you don't teach the history and the problems that history has caused, you don't have to admit there's a problem. And if there's no problem, there's nothing that needs to be fixed. Which is why the Supreme Court has struck down affirmative action. Thanks for watching and listening. I hope everyone has a great week.